Hello Shane, welcome to the Iron Throne podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm really excited to be joining you, so thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much too. We have already heard your previous interviews with Chase from Untitled Gaming and the most recent interview with George from Three Sails Gaming, but maybe some of our audience hasn't heard those interviews or doesn't know you, so please let me introduce you to the audience.
Okay, perfect.
So when you were younger, you were interested in Warhammer 40k and Lord of the Rings, but you didn't have enough money to get into those games, which I can relate to. Me too. You then become a huge fan of the Game of Thrones and began playing the board game, even making your own custom cards for you or your friends. Then the Kickstarter for A Song of Ice and Fire miniatures games really got your attention, the same with me, with the many cool miniatures and sketch goals. Now you run the website boardmangaming.com, a website we mention a lot during our podcast because we enjoy your scenarios. You have a lot of scenarios here, 36 in total right now. Wow. And a few days ago you gave the Song of Ice and Fire community a great surprise. The new Arryn Fanmade Faction with great artwork and rules. Unit cards that are unique and representative of the books. I think you really did an excellent job.
Thank you so much. I only speak one language, so to me, someone who's multilingual that's amazing. So you're already doing much better than me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this. Well, the first question is, at the present, what are your favorite games? Just A Song of Ice and Fire, or maybe some other systems like Infinity, Saga, Warhammer?
I think you can see from all of the effort I put into my scenarios and the House Arryn Faction that A Song of Ice and Fire is by far my favorite game, so it's kind of my obsession right now. Mm-hmm. When I'm not playing Song of Ice and Fire, typically I'm playing board games with my friends, so maybe Comet or Clank, so something a little bit less in-depth than any war games or Song of Ice and Fire.
Mm-hmm. Which games? Can you mention some games, please?
Clank, Settlers of Catan, King Domino, so those are some of my favorites.
Okay, thank you. Well, the next question, do you play online this game via Tabletop Simulator? What other online games do you usually play?
Yeah, I do play Song of Ice and Fire on Tabletop Simulator. Mm-hmm. I have one friend who is more of a casual gamer. He's not a member of, I guess, the Song of Ice and Fire community. And so he and I play still a lot because he does enjoy the game. Mm-hmm. And actually, when I was kind of first trying out the House Arryn Faction, I used them in Tabletop Simulator, but I didn't tell my friend that they were, made by me. So it was a fun way for me to try it out to see if he had any questions or anything that he pointed out that maybe wasn't very good. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of tried to sneak them in there and see if he noticed that they were, a fan-made faction. But yeah, I do play him quite a bit, but other than that, no, I don't play too many more online games, no.
Okay. You use this friend as sparring or as beta tester?
Yes, for sure, yeah.
Okay. Well, the next question. I think that your new Arryn Fanmade Faction and your 36 custom scenarios are good enough to deserve a place into the community mod. Do you think they should be there?
I do not think they should be in the community mod. I believe his name is Bartender on Discord, and he does a lot of the work for the TTS mod. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine how much work that is. And so to then ask that person to add fan-made content into that mod, I don't think would be very fair. If I can't do it, or maybe other people who would like to see it in there, if we can't put it in, I don't think we should ask people to do it. So I'm actually quite happy with it not being there. Mm-hmm. I think you can kind of, use your own skills to maybe add in the cards, or you can have the cards separately on a different page and then just use it as kind of a guide for you while you're playing the game. But I don't think they should be officially put in, no.
Okay, well answered. The next question. We know that you are a very creative person and, of course, you love this game, A Song of Ice and Fire, ever since you received the Kickstarter. And the Battle of the Whispering Woods scenario really inspired you when it was released by Simon. How did that scenario motivate you to create your own work?
So, when the Whispering Woods scenario first came out, I thought it was a really great idea. I think aspects of the execution were a bit lacking. Mm-hmm. First of all, it had like corpse piles instead of, the actual woods. Gregor Clegane was in the scenario when, of course, he's not a part of that event in the books. And so it really makes sense for CMON to incorporate those elements because they were trying to sell the starter set. And so it was really like incorporated with the starter set contents like Gregor Clegane and Jaime Lannister and Robb Stark. And so they had those kind of restrictions. And so I thought, maybe their next ones would be a bit more closer to the actual events in the books, but they actually didn't release any other of those kind of narrative scenarios. And so I thought, I don't have those restrictions where I'm trying to sell something. I can really go as close to the books as possible. So that's when I kind of started to make Battle of the Bastards and Battle in the Green Fork and all those other scenarios and keep them as close to the books as possible.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, obviously Battle of the Bastards is for the TV show, but as close to the books or TV show as possible.
Okay, the next question. Approximately how many more scenarios do you plan to do in the future? Is there a limit to your imagination? Will you one day say, okay, I made enough, good job, here, on to the next project?
Yeah, I actually checked very recently, and I have, I guess, the ideas or the templates for about 70 scenarios in total, so about double of what I have now.
Whoa, oh my god.
Yeah, a lot of ideas. Basically, every single major event from the books or TV shows, and when I say event, I mean obviously like a armed conflict, some kind of, battle or clash between characters. So I have an idea for a scenario. And so there's only really a couple limits. The first limit is what's CMON going to release? I have ideas for scenarios with the others, and so maybe the others are attacking the Night's Watch like they do when Sam and the rest of them are at the Fist of the First Men.
Oh, so cool.
But if they never release those miniatures, I can never really make that. Obviously, I made House Arryn, but I don't plan to make any more factions, so I am limited a bit with what CMON releases. The other thing as well is that I have a free website. So right now, I'm not paying any monthly fees, but once I start uploading more content, I might have to start paying because it's a lot more storage space. And so I really want to keep it just like a free, fun thing for the community. And so as long as I can afford that and keep up the upkeep for the website, I will continue to do it. And so yeah, probably hopefully for the next couple of years for all the new releases, I will continue to make more scenarios. I'll try and finish my 70 scenarios that I have planned.
Okay. Please let me give you some kind of input. Maybe the Others Fanmade Faction by Yannick Bohr will be a cool fusion with your custom scenarios, or maybe you can make some kind of collaboration with him. I think that this will be a well synergy, Yeah,
I really liked what they did, but it's not how I would have done it. And so I think maybe that's a possibility, but right now it's not on the list of my priorities.
Okay, I know. Well, the next question. Could you please give us a teaser of the new Greyjoy scenarios that you have planned but not mentioned previously?
Yeah, so I mentioned how for House Arryn I was really inspired by the Eyrie. One of the other locations from Westeros that I'm really inspired by is Moat Cailin, which is the kind of protection from the north from all the southern realms. And so it's these three like kind of decrepit towers. And so I think that's a really awesome visual. And so I have two scenarios planned for House Greyjoy. The first will be Victorian Greyjoy coming into Moat Cailin and attacking kind of the Cranachman and the Starks. And it's going to be set up like Honed and Ready, which is the scenario where you get shot at the castle walls on the side. But instead now you're going to be getting shot at from the different towers because there's going to be objective tokens around these towers. And then there's going to be another scenario where it's going to be Ramsay Bolton and then kind of Reek, who's been mind-washed by Ramsay Bolton, going to take over Moat Cailin and take it back from the Greyjoys. So that's going to be the second part of that scenario. So I'm really excited because it uses a lot of terrain and uses a lot of new features that I haven't really showcased before.
Okay, great. And do you have anything planned with the House Martell?
So after everything with House Arryn, it got a really great reaction from the community, but I just don't think I really want to work on another wide-scale faction creation again. One thing with House Martell is that I really hope that CMON releases it possibly at the end of this year or maybe next year. And so I don't want to create something that's going to be kind of obsolete in a year or two. House Arryn, I kind of took the gamble that they will not release House Arryn, or that if they do release it, it might not be for 2 or 3 years. And so that's why I picked them. Because I want to kind of show that they would be a really cool faction and maybe represent them even if they aren't going to become an official faction.
Okay, it's so wise from your part. I love your custom backgrounds and the pictures that you make for each scenario with the miniatures detached from the movement trace. They look really good this way. I definitely prefer your pictures of unpainted miniatures rather than pictures, for example, of my badly painted miniatures. I try to play my miniatures in other skirmish games like Saga, using the Amber Berserkers and Great Axes as Vikings, and for me, without the movement trace, they look even better on the table. So, do you plan to make a kind of mini skirmish scenario without movement trace? Or even some kind of duel between two characters? I assume this will require new rules and mechanics.
Yes. Actually, the pictures that I take for all of the scenarios, kind of cover photos, that actually takes a very long time to do. I have to set up all the terrain, and I have to make sure the lighting is really well done. And getting very close with all the miniatures. And obviously my great shame is that my miniatures are not painted, so I'm sure your miniatures are excellent.
No.
But as far as skirmish rules, I'm really not interested in those kind of games. I love the rules and the gameplay for the Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game, and so I don't really want to kind of change that around or alter that in any way. I rather find unique ways to incorporate terrain into the tray style system rather than inventing an entirely different game for these miniatures.
Okay, yeah, I understand. But I would love to a custom scenario of the trial by combat between Oberyn Martell and the Mountain, for example. What if the Red Viper of Dorne wins? But okay, I understand you. So you have something similar with the Beer and the Maiden Fair scenario, with small 25-point armies. Can you talk to us a little bit about this and how you think it captures this scene from the book and the TV show?
Yeah, I think that's a really fun scenario because it's very unusual to have 25-point armies on both sides. I thought it captured the spirit of the event where Brienne is battling this bear. You can imagine that if things got out of hand between like Steelshanks Walton and Jaime Lannister and all these characters that were there, that it maybe could have broken out into a fight with all those characters. So I thought it was a fun way to explore that scenario. But it is, again, a very small scale, like in the actual book, it's just really Brienne versus the bear. I kind of was saying, like, what if that escalated into a bigger conflict? You mentioned, like, Oberyn versus the Mountain. I'm not really sure if I could think of a good way to have that, like, duel captured in the tabletop game. But what I could maybe do instead is have a what-if scenario where maybe Oberyn went to the Riverlands when he heard that, Gregor Clegane was in the Riverlands, kind of raising all these buildings and destroying all this stuff, and then maybe he challenged him, with his army there. So there could be a way that they kind of meet each other, and I can do this within the game system without having to do, one-on-one, which is really obviously very difficult to do with the tray-style system.
Yeah, I understand you. But if you let me, I would love to see someday in the future the small skirmish of the escape of Daenerys and Drogon at Daznak Pit, because I love this scene in the TV show. I think that it will be brilliant. I know that you don't plan to do this, but it will be so cool.
Yeah, I think Daznak's Pit is similar to the Bear and the Maiden Fair, where if I do the TV show version, it is the Sons of the Harpy, coming in and attacking Daenerys and her retinue and Dario Naharis and Tyrion, all those characters. So I think there's enough characters and enough people involved where I could definitely do that scenario. That's one thing as well, though, where there's a lot of characters in Essos and especially Slaver's Bay, which I think would be really interesting as a faction. But I'm not sure if Simon would ever create that faction. So if they ever did, though, I would definitely do Daznak's Pit. I would do, the Battle of Meereen and all those really cool battles.
Okay, thank you. I would love to see this. Well, the next question. About the organized play, I think you have enough material with your custom scenarios to organize something like a thematic tournament or leagues. Did you want to try to organize something more friendly and narrative like this?
Yeah, I think once everything hopefully opens back up, in the upcoming months, maybe near the end of the year, I'd like to start playing more in my local scene. And then if my fellow players are interested in something like that, I would definitely be happy to organize it. I think it's really up to individual communities if you want to have a more fun, casual night where you're, not trying out competitive lists and all that stuff. It might be really fun to plan a couple narrative scenarios and string them together. If you actually check the website, you can see that there's a couple scenarios like the Attack on the Wall or the Battle of Blackwater Bay where there's already, 2 or 3 scenarios stringed together to create kind of a long, maybe best 2 out of 3 competition. And so I think, it's really up to the group. If the group's really excited about that, I would be interested. But if they were more interested in just trying out new lists and like competitive lists and stuff like that, I wouldn't really try to push it on them.
Yeah, I think that this will be incredible. Some kind of mini campaign of one day, with 3 games or 4.
One thing that's really cool is I just mentioned like the Battle of Blackwater Bay. And so it looks really impressive because I actually have like a giant ship model. And so the ship is like a river. I have, a game mat that has kind of the water with the beach and everything. And so it just looked awesome. And I have some wildfire scenario that you can see in the document.
Yeah, I think
this. It's a lot more visually impressive. And so it is really fun to just kind of set up the game and have it look like exactly like the event from the TV show or the books.
Please let me tell you that I love the wildfire markers in this scenario and all the stuff you made here. It's brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I use those ones a lot, yeah.
There is a lot of great ideas here. Well, now we will focus on your new fan-made House Arryn expansion. The card looks almost like the actual ones, and your design is very professional. We know you already talked about some aspects of this Arryn faction with yours, so we will try to not repeat questions. First, I want to talk about the design and layout. How did you make the blue background of cards and the design of the filigree? Is that homemade or it is taken from an artist who is credited in the last page of your PDF or something like that?
So for the background and the filigree, those are things where I took various elements I found on the internet and I put them together myself. And so I found a textured sky blue background, then I added kind of a feather design to it. I changed the kind of saturation of it, so I made it a much brighter blue. Actually, originally when I was designing the first card, I thought maybe I'd do like a dark blue because the game has kind of a darker aesthetic. For the Baratheons, they didn't go with yellow cards. They went with like black cards with a yellow border. And so I thought maybe it'd be more like the aesthetic of the game to have a navy blue. But I really like the bright colors. I kind of wish the Baratheons were, the models were like of a brighter yellow, and the cards are maybe yellow. So I decided to go with that sky blue color, which is very tied into House Arryn. And then for the actual filigree, which is the design there in between the borders, that was probably the hardest thing to design for the entire card. And so it is just several elements I've layered together. And so it's like a Celtic design that I found online, and then I put actually like a marble texture behind it. There's actually some texture of clouds in it as well. So I've kind of just melded all these things together using transparencies and layering to make it look like something new.
Yeah, it is so cool. I love this. And by the way, I think that the clear blue color, it's so cool and represents so well the Arryn spirit, like a clean blue sky.
Yes, I think it really goes well with House Arryn. So I wanted to keep that, and I think it was a good choice.
Yeah, I think so. Now, some questions about mechanics and combos. The Knights of the Vale seems to be too good for 9 points. Critical blow and vulnerable could maybe lead to a one-shot attack. What's your thinking behind this design?
So the first thing I'll mention is that this is obviously something I put together over the last month. It's a fan-made faction, and so I totally understand that it's not going to be perfect. And I'm really happy to hear people's ideas and stuff like that, because there's no way I could have make a balanced faction in this amount of time. It's really more about putting the idea out there and having this really fun thing. And actually the response has been really good as far as balance, but I always know that it's not going to be perfect. Far from it, right?
Yeah, don't worry about this. This is not a problem right now, and it's just an input, okay?
Of course.
So your work is so cool, and I think that this will be balanced, so don't worry about that.
I love the input, and all that stuff is great. But for the design of the Knights of the Vale, the Knights of the Vale are very legendary. They're the most famous cavalry in all of Westeros. And so I had to look at the Champions of the Stag. I had to look at I started looking originally at the Knights of Casterly Rock and the Tully Cavaliers, but then obviously I decided to do another Lance Cavalry because I wanted 2 options. And so really the Champions of the Stag were a big inspiration. And we can see now with the 2021 update that the units that are higher costed are very powerful units. And so critical blow, you can always, your spike damage with that could lead to a one-shot attack, but that could be with any unit with critical blow. I think in general, I like that it's a really kind of powerful unit that people have to focus on that. But it's going to take up probably about a third of your on-field points for your army list. So it has to be powerful. And I think we're seeing also with the 2021 update that these 8 and 9 point units are extremely powerful. They're extremely deadly. Because I think that's one way they're going to get the activation kind of spam down is by having these really powerful, higher cost units. And so right now, I think the Knights of the Vale are maybe somewhere between like the Knights of Casterly Rock and the Champions of the Stag. But once the entire 2021 update's released, I'm happy to go back and maybe take out the vulnerable token or maybe change something about them so they're not as powerful as they are now.
Okay, great. I think so that in the books, the Knights of the Vale are so powerful. The most powerful Arryn unit, so...
They're very famous, yes.
Yeah, so it's cool right now. Well, about the NCUs, they are cool, but very powerful. I heard your explanation about the ability of Robert Arryn, child, and that he might be too powerful, but we are more worried about the Align Stone ability. So, her ability is reveal one card of the opponent's hand once per round. Is that maybe too powerful?
As far as Robert, I'm actually thinking for the repetition of his ability to use more than one token to do that damage on the panic test, that maybe the unit that they're targeting has to have a vulnerable token on it. Then you have to decide, do I want to use the vulnerable token or do I want to use Robert's ability? I think that might be a good change. For Elaine, originally I had just the ability of her revealing the card and then the addition of you control the letters that your opponent would have to discard one. I actually didn't think it was very powerful because your opponent controls the entire thing. And so your opponent decides which card to show you. Opponent decides which card they're discarding. And so Tyrion has a very powerful ability where he gets to do twice per game in the current 1.6 version. Your opponent shows you 2 cards and then you discard one. And so, you get to see 2 of their cards. You get to decide which one's gone. And so I thought for Elaine that really sometimes your opponent will show you a card that you don't care. It's not going to affect the game at all. You're not going to change your strategy because you see this card. Maybe even sometimes your opponent will show you a card and that will get in your head. You'll say like, well, I can't charge them now because they have this card. And it's actually like very psychological that your opponent showed you this card and now they're kind of controlling the game a bit more because they have this power over you. So overall, I do think it is very powerful. And talking to people like you and some other people, I think maybe it might be better as a replace effect instead of having this ability in addition to the tactic zones. So what do you think about that? Like a replace effect or maybe order tokens? Which one do you think would be better?
Replace effect will be so nice. I must say that this effect is cool right now, but in some kind of situations, for example, if your opponent just have one card and he reserves the best card for the end, for example, a counterplot or something like that, if you see this card, you can disrupt his strategy or, you can maneuver against this card, the last card that he have in his hand.
Yes, and so it's very important. There's strategies obviously against the Arryn faction that I was thinking of. One strategy is you have to really focus on the tactic zone, so the letter zone, and you have to make sure that you have lots of cards in your hands. You have to make sure that you're taking the letter zone away from them. And so that's actually a weakness of House Arryn is that they only have one zone that they focus on, the tactics board. And so your opponent knows every other round they're going to be controlling the letters and they're going to be taking power away from you.
Yeah, this is true.
Littlefinger actually works very well with Elaine because Littlefinger then has the ability to come in after your opponent claims the letters, and then you can move your opponent's NCU, and then you can claim the letters for yourself. And so you can see how, like in the books, Littlefinger is teaching Elaine how to be a political kind of mastermind and learn all this stuff. So in the game now, Littlefinger and Elaine work very well together because then you can have complete control of the letters and have a very powerful army if you have those two together.
And this is exactly as the books, so I love this. Okay. So we noticed a combo that if the Brotherhood of Winged Knights have bad luck and fail a critical panic test, you can save the last wounds of this unit using the Marillion Order and prevent Robert Arryn, Child and his bodyguard from being destroyed. We also think the Giant's Lanes and Alyssa's Tears are very cool and innovative cards. How exactly work those 2 cards? Can you explain to us?
Yes. And so I think Marillion that's one of the few original abilities that I created. But I was very proud of it because it's an attachment that I think a lot of times maybe won't be worth it. But if you use it at the very right moment, it can maybe win you a game. And so I think it is a really fun ability, and that's what I try and do is I create units that I think are going to be fun or interesting. And so, yeah, and Merillion, it really goes back to his character from the books where, spoilers, they blame him for the death of Lysa Arryn. And so he's the scapegoat that they all use, and then Littlefinger then gets all of this power because he becomes the kind of leader of the protector of the Vale of Arryn because Lysa has been murdered by him, right? But he uses Merillion as his scapegoat and tells the Lord's declarants that Merillion did it.
Okay, don't worry about the spoilers, okay?
Yeah, it's from a book released 22 years ago, so hopefully they have read it. But exactly, and so your unit that you have Merillion in, you're using them as a scapegoat to make up for all your mistakes that you've made and the panic test that you're failing. As far as the Alyssa's Tears and Giant's Lance, once I thought of how I liked Stone, Snow, and Sky, which are the 3 way castles, which are up the mountain and defend the Eyrie as people travel up the mountain. I thought those would be really cool as a way to connect those 3 things together to empower the Arryn army. And so I said, well, maybe if you have those 3 and you play them, and then they kind of build on each other, so there's a strength. And I thought, what if you play all 3, and then you can trade them in? I think, honestly, my favorite part is that there's really beautiful artwork on the Alyssa's Tears and Giant's Lance card. And so that's from Ted Naismith, who's an amazing artist. And then, so you get to trade those in and get a very powerful ability. And so that's one thing where you can either maybe focus on getting these 3 and really trying to get those powerful abilities, or you can just use your tactics cards as you normally would and maybe don't, throw them off. I know some people might play it. They might just throw away their cards at the end of every round because they want those 3 so badly. It's 2 really interesting ways to play House Arryn.
I think so. Okay, great. I love your hammer and anvil concept here, with the Cavalry Knight as hammers and the Royce Bronze Guardians as the anvil with their order, or even the card, the Bloody Gate, that gives you +1 to defense saves both. What was your inspiration to do this?
A lot of all the stuff I'm talking about, actually, if people do want to check out the website boardmangaming.com, I do kind of talk about my inspiration. And so a big part of it, too, was the Mountains of the Moon and the Bloody Gate and all the defensive structures that kind of protect the Vale of Arryn. And so I really wanted to find defensive cards and defensive abilities already found in the game and then apply it to the units that I was creating. And so the Bloody Gate card, that is actually Don Elnoy's ability called Bulwark Formation. And so really it's showing how when the Bloody Gate, it's basically these 2 towers and this giant gate in between the mountains. And so no one can go into the Vale of Arryn unless they have to send their entire army up against this gate and battle for, a long time. They're going to lose tons of men. And so all these defensive things are really inspired by the actual layout of the Vale of Arryn with the mountains around it.
Okay, great. And finally, some questions about the future updates and improvement of your work. Do you plan to rework the full faction after the full release of the 2021 faction packs?
Yeah, I hope there won't be too much that I have to change because I was kind of considering the 2021 updates when I made it. But yes, if I notice anything glaring, especially the Lance ability, if that changes, I'm going to change that with the Arryn Lancers and stuff like that. So yes, they will be changed.
Okay, thank you. Now it seems that the 3+ to hit is very common in your Arryn units. If you let me some advice, maybe the cheap middle cost units should use more the 4+. It's just an impression.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when I first started designing it, I didn't think I was going to make an entire faction. So I thought maybe I'd make 2 infantry units and then 1 cavalry unit. And so I wanted to make higher cost units because then I could maybe fill out a full army because their cost is so high, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought 2 7-point units. And all of a sudden you can get up to, 21 points, 28 points, but in the cavalry unit. And so to me, it seemed easier to make an army that had higher point cost because I could make less units. Since it was very popular and everyone seems to really enjoy it, I might go back now and add in some 5-point units that have 4+ to hit. But right now, all the units in the army are very elite. They're all 7 points, 8 points, 9 points. And so those units, they should be hitting on 3+ because you're paying for that ability.
Okay. So about the Varnished Men, I think it's a cool complement to the elite high-cost units. And what if they have less penalties in their unit abilities, but instead have more kind of anti-synergy with the Arryn Tactics deck?
One thing I like about the Burnmen is that all these abilities are innate. They're fundamental to who they are. And so if it was just had to do with anti-synergy with the tactics deck, then really you could just play around it and it's not going to be as fundamental to who they are. And I really wanted to make them almost like a separate unit. And so I do have an idea, though, of a commander, probably Shaga, who's the leader of the Stone Crows. And so he would be a commander that then would take away some of the abilities of the Burnmen and the Stone Crows and the other mountain tribes. But I don't want to take away the fundamental aspect that if you're playing like a House Arryn unit led by Robin Arryn or Littlefinger, that those units are not going to be working exactly for you, but instead they're working like in proximity to you, right? They're doing their own separate raid to get their own benefits, and so they're not controlling objective tokens. They're not getting points from victory through combat, but they're still causing chaos. They're still killing people. And so I like that it's a fundamental aspect from them that you can't take away just by playing around with tactics cards.
Okay, yeah, I think this is more attractive to players and more accurate to the books. And finally, do you think that this faction will be officially released by Simon in the future? Do you think it will be like your fan-made concept, or maybe some huge changes here?
Yeah, originally when I made House Arryn, I was thinking that I didn't know if they would be a good faction. But then the more research I did, the more excited I got, and in the end, I think they would be a really cool faction. Thinking about it right now, like, I don't think they will, because they still have House Martell, which is such a big deal and has so many awesome characters. And then you have, after that, you can do stuff with, you know, the young Griff, like Aegon and John Connington, and the Golden Company. You have the Brotherhood Without Banners. So you have all these characters you still have to release. And so I think maybe the like Knights of the Vale and maybe some of these units might be neutral units or something. I'm not sure if they'll release an entire faction. I just don't really see it right now. Like, in my mind, before I kind of did all this stuff, like even the Tyrells were probably much more popular than House Arryn. And we saw that the Tyrells, you know, are just a sub-faction, a part of Renly's faction with Baratheons. So right now I would say probably not, but obviously the future extends to infinity from now. And so within the next couple of years, I'm going to say I don't think so. But if they do release it, I think there obviously will be a lot of similarities just because I'm using the same characters. I'm using the same famous unit types like the Knights of the Vale of Arryn, the Knights of the Vale cavalry unit. And so there'll be those connections. But I'm sure just like Fabio Curry and Michael Chanel came up with these amazing new concepts for the Greyjoys, I'm sure they're thinking of stuff for like the Vale of Arryn that if they are designing it that we could never even think of. And so if I think it does come out, the core concept and the identity of the faction is going to be very different than mine, which is actually just kind of borrowed from all the different ideas from like Starks and Targaryen and Lannisters and Baratheon. So I think their idea is probably going to be more original and better for the game overall.
Right, okay. Thank you so much, Shane, for being here and tell us more details about this new fan-made faction and your next scenarios. We're really looking forward to them. Best regards, and Valar Morghulis.
Valar Dohairis.
Thank you so much.